Great. Okay, so one of the things we wanted to ask is, well, why bother? Why even try? So one of the things we want to do is we want to provide a low to zero cost introduction to APL. So we're trying to make the hurdles non-existent to expose somebody to APL, to allow them to use it. We want to try and facilitate learning APL. So we want to give people an experience where they can interact with APL and get something out of it. We want to facilitate idea exchange. And so I don't know if you've seen the One-Liner Wednesdays that Dyalog has put out in the past, but these hyperlinks here are links that'll take you to try APL and execute the APL expression and allow you to play around with it. And then, well, everybody else does it. There are ways to try all different languages online, and APL ought to be one of them. So Adam and I are going to speak about two different approaches to trying APL online. And I'll be speaking about Try APL, and Adam will be speaking about TIO. So Try APL was introduced in January of 2012.
Whereas TIO has had APL since this January.
And currently, Try APL runs MyServer 2.1, and we'll be upgrading that very shortly to MyServer 3.
TIO has its own framework, and that's what it uses for APL.
Also, Try APL currently runs Dyalog 14.0, and we will be upgrading that. Coincident with our 3.0 upgrade, we'll be upgrading that to Dyalog version 16.
TIO uses whichever version of APL is the latest quick update.
With Try APL, you have a pseudo APL session. In other words, it looks a lot like the APL session that you're used to. You type in an input, some output appears below it, it scrolls up, you can recall things in the session, and so on.
Whereas on TIO, you have to specify everything, code, input, output, all at the beginning before you start.
With Try APL, you have a single line at a time input, which means there are no multi-line defuns, you can't define trad funds, you can't use Adam's array notation yet, but you're limited to a single line at a time input.
Whereas in TIO, you basically have a scripted workspace that you start in, and then you have a scripted session.
So also, Try APL has got a whitelisted set of operations. We didn't want somebody to be able to go in and do quad-sh rm star or use execute or a few other things. So we're using a subset of the full Dyalog development environment.
Whereas on TIO, you can try pretty much anything you would want. Even Andy can't break it.
Oh, now there's a challenge.
He tried.
So the idea of Try APL is to provide an introduction to APL. It's not a system where you're going to be developing applications, but it's an exploratory type of environment.
Whereas TIO more shows how APL is run.
So let's talk about the genesis of Try APL. Actually, it was 5 years ago here that we gave the story of Try APL, I now recall. And so this will be the Reader's Digest condensed version of that. So it was back in Boston, Massachusetts at the Dyalog 11 conference when Joel Huff, who was the winner of that year's APL competition, had a few things to say.
And I usually have a set of steps I go through, the phases of me learning a language. First, I try it online. So this is a website, tryhaskell.org. It's usually how it goes, trywhateverlanguage.org. You can type Haskell code in there, hit enter, and it will evaluate it and give you the result. Absolutely zero barrier to entry for trying Haskell. And this isn't a unique thing. I've got a list. Here's Scheme. Here's Ruby. So I decided to try this trick with APL. I typed in try APL online. And I got this. This is an FTP site from who knows where, of a FAQ from '94.
So Morton, as you alluded to yesterday, was sitting somewhere in the room and had IM'd me on Pigeon, and he says, we need to build tryapl.org. And I stupidly replied, yeah, I think so too. About 15 seconds later, I had a moment of clarity. Well, 3 months later, tryapl.org was released in January of 2012. So, and then in June 2012, we suffered from the Reddit effect. TryAPL had gotten mentioned on Reddit, and suddenly thousands of users descended upon TryAPL all at once. I'm pleased to say that the My Server portion kept up with it, but it created so many session files that when we did the quad flib to keep track of them, we whiz-fulled. So the server was happily humming along, but we just had too many session files. We've since corrected that glitch. So TryAPL today. Well, we average about 1,200 users a month. And one of the things I want to talk about is how do you get APL characters into TryAPL? And we've got no fewer than 5 different ways. If you happen to have Dyalog APL or the Windows IME installed, you can use that. TryAPL has a floating keyboard that you can use. We have what's known as a primer, or the English call it a primer. In America, we call it a primer, so you can use whichever pronunciation you care, but it's basically a cheat sheet. We have backtick input. How many people are familiar with that in RIDE or whatever? Okay, not enough. Okay, we're going to show that. And then you can always copy and paste. So, and then you can also click on examples that appear in the tutorials or elsewhere in TryAPL, and it will copy those to the input area. So we're going to try telling a little fib and
Windows.
Windows. Okay, so here's TryAPL, and so here's the APL keyboard, and it's a floating keyboard. You can move it around, and if you click on things, it will copy them into the input area. You can click on examples that appear in the code or elsewhere in the site. The hyperlink that I clicked on in the PowerPoint presentation displayed this Fibonacci series calculator and then ran an example. And that was just with the hyperlink. And the backtick keyboard, if you press backtick and then press the key on the keyboard that you would expect to produce the APL symbol, like backtick R, will produce the row. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to deviate slightly here from the presentation, since so many people didn't put their hands up about the RIDE backtick keyboard, is I'm going to start up 4 different RIDE sessions now. That part was unintentional. So, here's the RIDE. Okay, so here's RIDE. And if I do backtick, backtick, it comes up with this nifty, I don't know if you can see it. If you can't, I can't make it any bigger. But it basically comes up with a dictionary. And if you type a name for a glyph or a function or something that you think might be related to what you're trying to accomplish, it will fill it in for you. So for instance, if I wanted minimum, it will give me minimum. And it has all kinds of synonyms. So if you want the row character, you can do backtick, backtick, row, backtick, backtick, reshape, backtick, backtick, shape, and maybe a few others. But this is a really nice way for people that are used to languages that have named functions like min, max, abs, and things like that, for them to get used to typing in APL. I had 2 interns over the summer that made extensive use of this. I have two other Try APL stories to share while I go back to the presentation.
Still sharing screen.
Yeah, I know. One is sharing with John Scholes and his little session that he did one evening a few weeks ago with a bunch of functional programmers in Dublin. And what, there were 25-ish?
Yeah, around, yeah.
Okay, and they were all using Try APL. And, you know, again, nothing to install, nothing to, you know, they just used it. And my favorite one is one that Adám shared with me the other day, which is he happened to be in some sort of a store in Montreal, and somehow the conversation with the store clerk got talking about APL. So Adám was able to demonstrate Try APL to him on his cash register. So I'll turn it over to you. There you go. Oh, Try APL Future. Yes, there we go. Sorry, one more screen. So again, we're going to upgrade it to MyServer 3 and Dyalog 16.0. We want to develop more tutorials, and so they can even be very simple things about you know, shape or individual primitives or whatever. They don't have to be as elaborate as Game of Life or Sudoku solvers. We want you to be able to save your work locally and then recall it at a future time. And then we want to make a more responsive layout so that if people are using it on phones or tablets, that the form factor works out a little bit better. So, and then we also want to implement that ride style input so that if you do backtick, it comes down with that drop-down menu.
Okay, so over to TIO, or Try It Online, TIO. First, a little bit of background about that. First thing, of course, is Dennis, the moderator and top-ranking user on the Stack Exchange CodeGolf site. He is very active there, but also does other things, including making his own programming languages. Prolific writer of those, he has, for example, made ShapeScript, which is a stack-based language, and M, which is a golfed form of J, and Jelly, which is the golfed form of J, and Caesars and SadFlag. And of course, he has made the TIO, or Try It Online framework, which is a safe sandbox, or playground if you want, that has a lot of programming languages available. Last time I checked, there was 347 programming languages, from Algol to ZSH. Everything in between, it's approximately a third of those that are practical, real-life use programming languages, and the rest of them are various experimental or for fun languages. It's been around for a little over two years. As I mentioned, APL has only been there for half a year. And today, all these languages together see over 250,000 users per month. So, how did Dyalog APL end up on Try It Online? Well, it started with me looking for answers to some questions about Judaism, and I found the Judaism Stack Exchange site. Now on Stack Exchange, there's a box on the right side that shows you the hot network questions from other sites that might be interested, and somehow I went into this programming puzzles and CodeGolf Stack Exchange. It sounded interesting, and of course I had to contribute with APL solutions to things. I wanted to show people that my code actually worked and did what it was supposed to. Then I put links to Try APL, but it quickly became apparent to me that that's not always enough. For good reason, there are restrictions on Try APL, and so a lot of things I couldn't get around. Everybody else used Try It Online, and I thought, well, maybe we have to do this too. So I contacted Dennis in the Try It Online chat room, and I asked him if we could do that. And then we worked on it a little bit, and then Morten said, that's nice. So, why do we want to have Dyalog APL and Try It Online? Well, APL is very different, and presenting it in a framework together with other languages, where it's necessarily coerced into a format that's familiar to the non-APL world, is a good thing. It makes it much easier for people to relate to APL, even if that's not the normal use mode of APL. It also can show an entire algorithm or steps of doing something at once, not just a single statement. And of course, for good reason, TryAPL has its restrictions, but Try It Online can do pretty much anything. Really, the only restrictions there are you can't do graphical stuff for good, because it's like in a terminal, and you cannot go online. But sure, you can go in and erase files on the file system, and you can do parallel processing and spawn off new processes and make calls to other languages that are on Try It Online. So let's try some of that stuff that we would never do on TryAPL. Which
Is that it?
That's pretty blank.
Okay, go to duplicate.
I can delete this.
Or that, yeah.
Yeah, okay, how's that? A little more? Good, so here's an example of a whole session. Now, Try It Online running APL gives you an absolutely clean APL, meaning query is not even populated. There's nothing there. It's basically like a runtime. And so in order to be able to use Salt, we have to boot up Salt, and the way you would do it in a clean environment, and then we can have multiple statements. This is the input section corresponds to what you know as the session, and the code section is the workspace. So we start off with an empty workspace. And then you can see we're using utilities that ship with Dyalog APL. It's a complete install with all the folders and all the utilities and all the workspaces. Everything is available. You can load defense. And we can use those, and we can use user commands after we booted Salt, and we can use execute, of course. And we can go and run that, and so it runs. And then in the familiar, so we get a 1 as an answer to the expression. So this is normal output, and in a format that's familiar to the world out there, we separate between standard output and standard error, where messages go. And so there is this pane at the bottom, which is where all messages go. So you can see we got when we loaded the build.ac workspace, so we got the messages from APL go down here. We message from user command system go here, and display from user commands goes down here. And Try to add some diagnostic information at the bottom. It's basically quad AI, telling you what happened, and also the exit code from APL. Everything worked out fine.
I think if you click that. There we go.
Not yet. Okay, here's another one. This is, somebody asked me a question, if APL has object orientation. I said, sure. And now that we had Try It Online, I can do that. So this is basically like a workspace. Imagine you could write a colon workspace. So you have a scripted workspace. This is everything that goes in. The way it works is a little bit magic underneath the hood, but it's actually pretty simple. And we have a class in our workspace, and we have members of the class, and we can run stuff in the session after we've defined all our things. So this is the input as if somebody typed it into the session. And we can run that. And then we can scroll down. And we can see that the instance was created, the message from the constructor, and we have method being run. We get the output down here. And finally, this is a little bit larger example. So this actually comes from a Code Golf challenge, and writing the shortest possible 2048 game, fully interactive, input-output while it's running. And of course, you can't do that on TryAPL. Try It Online, you can't have interactivity, because everything has to be predetermined. Everything is scripted. But we can we can kind of pretend that it happens. So here's our workspace. We have some various functions that we define. We can use thread functions, we can use defense, we can use tacit functions. And then we have some helper functions to help me with the interactivity. So every time the function asks for input, then we can type something into the session. So there will be another line in the session area. And we're going to take that input, we're feeding it through a helper function because it's a quad, so we can execute anything. We're going to spit out a display form because we have boxing on of the input, so we can see what happened with words, and then we get an output from the function as it runs in its recursive. So it runs until it's finished. So right now we can see that. So going to turn on load salt, turn on boxing, run the game, and then the game will start asking for input, and we're going to input the result of the function slide left, slide up, slide left. If you've ever used the 2048 game, that's what you do. So you can see that the output is currently blank, and we can run that. See? Okay, so here we have an initial state of a board. So this was output by the main function, this was output by the helper function. We tried left, that didn't work because it's already at the left edge, so we try again, we slide it up. This is how the rules go, and you can see the various states. And you can also see they can do as much output basically as we want. There are some limits, but there's plenty there. So, that concludes it. We're going to take questions. But before you ask a question, give a look at this. I know it's dense, but a lot of your questions are probably answered right here with the comparison between try it online and try APL.
I have a question. Oh, I don't know if Brian, could you go back to your final slide on try APL?
I can try.
You mentioned a couple of things. You said, please contribute, but you didn't say anything about how one could do that.
Yeah, actually.
And I believe you're about to change the way that one would do that. So is that
Yes.
a bit premature?
I got a little flummoxed, and I apologize, but
You represent.
I want my browser. I really hate PowerPoint. Okay, so on Try APL, I skipped over a few things. One is the primer. So this is basically based on the language bar in the product. And so you can hover over any one of these things and get a short definition of what the glyph is. You'll get the keystroke to reproduce it using the backtick keyboard. And if you click on it, it will copy the session. We've also had this learn section with a woefully short list of tutorials. And tutorials up to this point have been a little cumbersome to produce. So we're coming up with a new format based on some discussions with Morton and John Scholes so that you can very simply annotate steps that are either to be executed or to be commentary and build tutorials out of those. So for instance, okay, we'll do the Sudoku solver. So you can step through this and see, there are certain things that get copied to the session and executed, and there's some text in between. And so you can actually step through this. But it also gives you the chance to go back and recall previous lines if you want to tinker with them and see, and do a little bit of exploration. So, but these are more difficult to write now than they should be. And so we are working on it. And please, if you're interested in writing some tutorials, let us know, and we will get you the tools to help you do so.
You know what we might want to do?
What's that?
We might want to accept tutorials in the form of Jupyter notebooks.
Yeah.
So that anybody who wants to write a tutorial simply gets hold of the Jupyter implementation.
Yep.
And those will be JSON files of some format that we could simply convert, so you could have the same tutorials running.
That's
They
a
use
great
Markdown.
idea.
We could render Markdown.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I think that's it.
Something I really liked about Try It Online that might be worth sharing is how you can actually save what you've done. You get a URL for everything you've typed in, and then you can send it to someone. And similarly for Try APL, you showed how you can click on a link,
Right.
but you didn't show how you can generate that link.
Right. Yeah, so if on any statement in your session you hover over the end of it, you'll get this permalink tab, and it'll basically create a hyperlink that you can then cut or copy and paste into an email, into a tweet, or whatever.
Like
So,
that.
Yep, like that.
Can you show one?
So, well, you can just, I can copy this link, and insert that into a browser tab. It's just a long URL. It has all the information included right back. And for Try It, actually, I wanted to ask you a question. Let's say you wanted to use Try It Online to show somebody something. So hands up, whoever by now knows how to do that. How to type some APL and send it to somebody so that they can... Right, that's not good, right? So let's teach you that. So you go to tryitonline.run, and it greets you welcome, and it lets you choose between all the languages. We want APL, specifically Unicode APL, and let's type a function. We're going to teach people how you APL.
Just use the floating keyboard. Sorry.
How do you? Okay. On this keyboard. Right. So I'm populating our workspace, and after we populated the workspace, we're going to tell people that okay, now we can go and use this. So now we'll create a variable, and it has some values on it, and then after we've created that, then we can run the function on that, and that's it. So we can test it, of course, and see it gives the right result. That's great. So there's this link button up here, and it's really great. You can generate all kinds of links. So you can have just a plain URL like you had for Try APL, but you can also generate actual HTML that you can embed into your web page, or if you're using some kind of wiki format, you have the code for that. Markdown, like used many places, including Stack Exchange, and even like our forum uses a format like the bottom one. But for now, we'll just use
Code of submission.
Yeah, code of submission. That's the most important one, of course. Right, so we just click on the copy button, that copies it to your clipboard, works cross-platform, and now you've got a URL with all the information embedded, and paste into clean types. You can see that. There you go. Everything ready, and if you ran it before, then it will cache the result of your run. So that's good if it's something that takes a very long time or times out. It will show that already. If you want to refresh it, say you're using random numbers, you want something new, the user can then click on run again, it will recalculate everything. Now hands up, how many people know how to generate a URL to give people a try it online?
At least one more, yes. All right.
That's better.
Mission accomplished.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.